you want to be a student of your child. So asking questions when your kid comes home and talks about Miss Smith, she is the best teacher. Ask, well, what makes them the best teacher? Because oftentimes your child learns in a much different way than you do. And so sometimes, a lot of schools offer a parent input form at the beginning of the year where you can talk about your child and what teacher or learning environment works best for them. And so honestly, sometimes you don't know as a parent how they're learning their best, but you can learn a lot by asking, well, why is that teacher a great teacher? And then also when they complain about a teacher, well, tell me more about that. Why didn't you like what she said? Or why do you think she's a bad teacher? Little things that they will say, you'll realize sometimes it's a teaching style, but then also sometimes it's a classroom environment. There's just so many things. And unless we ask those questions, you just don't know what's really helping them at school.
Hey everybody, welcome to Wire Talk. Today we're continuing our series on back to school, and we're interviewing a principal of elementary years. And she's been in education and admin for over 20 years, and I'm so excited to have her expert opinion on Wire Talk. So let's get started.
Well, hello, everybody. Happy August. I can't believe we are in August, Moms. Can you believe it?
Crazy.
Technically,
hot. Yes.
It's not August right now. It's in June, but because I'm having a baby in August, y'all were very kind enough to let us interview early these amazing principals of schools. And so thank you, because I did cry when I was like, I just don't want to miss a Wire Talk. So
I know. That's what she said. Like after I'm pregnant. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. And then she starts, Mom, I don't want to miss Wire Talk. And I'm like, we have some flexibility.
Yes.
We'll work around it.
So,
but it ended up working out really well because these teachers are working during the summer. And so they came in and did these interviews to get us ready for back to school, which I have been loving.
I know, but they're not teachers. They're principals.
Well,
or
that's
directors.
true. Directors and yep, you're right.
So, but today y'all are in for a treat. We are going to be interviewing a principal, Amber Lamb. She is an elementary school principal, and it's going to be amazing. I've already looked at the questions. I'm so excited just to hear what Amber has to say about how moms and dads and just parents in general can just come alongside and find the best relationship between teachers and parents for their children and make the year just incredible. So,
well, it makes such a difference, and you're in those years right now with Harper.
Harper's about to be in first grade.
It really does make a big difference. And honestly, I think once the parents can be advocates of the teacher and be on their side and help navigate that whole school family dynamic, I think it's just a win-win for everybody.
I know. And to any of you who are listening who you're about to send your kindergartners to school for the first time, you're going to do great. They are going to love it. And my encouragement to you is early bedtime and early dinner time, because they are going to be so tired.
They really are.
That is my practical advice, and I did not create it. That was from my mom that told me.
Well, because I learned with 4 children.
Yes. So, I mean, literally the first 2 months of Harper's kindergarten year, we ate at like 5:15, and she was asleep by 6:45 because she was so tired. So,
well, it's a long, hard day, and they're not used to it.
It is.
So, but she loved it.
She did love it.
She
so
thrived.
Yes.
So, well, let's get started with Amber.
Let's get started, and y'all, welcome to the studio, Amber Lamb. Hello, Amber. How are you?
Doing well. Thank
Good.
you.
We're so excited you're on the air with us today. You were saying that you do the news at your school and you don't get retakes, but thankfully in Wire Talk, we do retakes. So we are very thankful for that.
Yes,
Because we just
grateful.
had to retake.
We just had to retake. Let's be honest. I had to retake the first one. So y'all are amazing. I'm the one who's on the struggle bus, but that's okay.
You're pregnant, so you get a pass.
That's right.
Always.
Before we get started, could you share with our audience like how you got started in education and where you were and where you are right now as an elementary school principal?
Yeah,
absolutely. And first, I just want to say thank you for having me. I've been a beneficiary of Birds on a Wire as a mom, so it's exciting to be here and share the principal lens with everybody. I just am one of those people, I always wanted to be a teacher. So probably from a kindergartner, I just knew that's what I wanted to do, and I never really changed course. So I always loved kids. I was always with my younger cousins and friends of the family, kind of entertaining them. And then as I got into the role, I realized I was a classroom teacher at first and then became a support teacher. And I realized that I loved supporting other teachers. And so I just slowly transitioned into leadership roles. And even starting in high school, there were people that kind of encouraged me to go into like a leadership role within like the organization that I was a part of, or and then my principals continued to see things and encourage me to do leadership. So
That's awesome.
I love it. I love supporting teachers, and ultimately that's my mission when I'm in the building, is to support staff members so that they can pour their best into students. So I'm still supporting students. It's just
In a different
oftentimes
way.
through staff members.
I
I love that. And what do you love about that elementary age child?
I love that they are curious. They don't see inside the box. They think bigger than really what's possible, which is really fun.
Yeah.
So it's just neat to see them try to problem solve and then coach them through. Well, okay, well, that isn't going to work because of, and kind of show them some limitations when appropriate. But it's just really fun to see them dream big.
Yeah.
And they're honest, super honest. and
Sometimes too honest.
Yes, which becomes hilarious a lot of times. You know, it could be, they could guess your age off by 10 to 20 years, but then they're also the first one to compliment on your earrings or your shoes or your hair. Like if you ever need a boost, you just walk down the kindergarten hallway and a kid's just going to highlight something amazing about you.
I love that.
Yeah, it's full of joy. You know, in elementary school truly, truly is.
I love that.
On one of Harper's All About Moms things, she said I was 97. So, you know, I was like, well, I look really good for 97.
I love it. Okay, well, let's dive into some of our questions. So you've been working in the school system with this age group for over 20 years, which is incredible.
Right.
So that's a big accomplishment, including navigating COVID. So we want to hear some stories about that. But what are some changes that you've seen in the elementary education, technology use, the family participant, you know, all that family life, learning styles, and cultural changes? Like, what can you tell our audience, like how it's changed over the years?
Well, definitely in 20 years, technology has changed drastically.
Yes.
I think the role within school has always been, as technology came into school, was to use it in a way that paper and pencil was no longer the answer, to really use it like in a transformational way through videos or creation. And that hasn't always been the case. So really trying to get it to be a creative tool for kids. But we also see that we have cell phones, you know, with our students, even as low as kindergarten.
Right.
So, which I think has inhibited some of the communication skills for kids, because sometimes then they're wanting to reach out to home when they don't feel well, when really like we need to help within the school building, you know, to have those trusted adults that the kids can go to and say like, I don't feel well. And we can try to help them to problem solve. Well, you know, do you need to get some water? Do you want to go see our nurse? And just that self-advocacy part is kind of lost a little bit. We saw through COVID, your world got a little bit smaller. Kids aren't as independent. They're not going outside to play as much and kind of having that developmentally appropriate risks, you know, with play and just being able to explore a little bit more. So we definitely want them to have confidence and feel like they can do some things independently. So I think really technology is one of those big cultural shifts right now that look very different. I think you also asked about like learning styles or parent participation. We definitely see fewer parents coming into the building, and whether that's, you know, due to work or just getting out of the habit with COVID. You know, we just weren't allowed in the building. And so now that it's available, just remembering that we still do want that parent connection within the walls of the school.
Well, and if you're going to be volunteering, elementary is the age to do it, because once they get to middle school, they don't want you necessarily to come in and help. But I think that's so interesting, what you said about the child's independence and the lack of, because we interviewed a director of a preschool last week, and she talked about the same thing, that parents need to start encouraging their children, even as young as preschoolers, that they can do things around the house. They can help empty the dishwasher. They can set the table. They can pick up their dirty clothes. She said, we are seeing more and more and more children are not doing those little things. And she said, it really does make a difference. And now you're saying that you see it in the elementary school as well.
Right. And it's a big jump. I mean, in a public school, you have an average class size probably of around 24, which could be give or take.
Right.
In a private school, maybe 14. But even still, probably from a pre-K setting or from being at home, with just siblings, there's obviously a lot that you have to take on roles within the classroom to help out, to have that classroom community. So it is, it's huge.
Well, this is a cultural thing. We were on vacation last week and somebody told Emily, what was it that they saw trending on Instagram? I mean, this is crazy.
My cousin said, Emily, have you seen the new trend where parents are letting their kids go up and order things? And I was like, please tell me more. And she was like, well, like if they're at Chick-fil-A, the parents will stay seated at the table and they'll be like, go get your refill. And I said,
and they're posting about it. It's like it's a big deal.
It's like a post. It's like a trend thing. And I'm like, that's not trending. That shouldn't be trending. That should just be parenting. That's like, you know what I mean? Like I was like, mom made me do that in the grocery store growing up. Like, hey, I'm going to go down aisle 4, go get some bananas. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like it was, I think everything to me is just like, what's a trend? What's exciting to do? So it really revved me up a little bit. So I was like, that's just.
But it's just sort of confirming that all of y'all in administration is seeing the lack thereof. And we need to get back to that. That's what I hear you saying. Is that right?
Right.
That's what the preschool teacher was saying too.
But I guess if the trending is that, I guess that's a good thing because then they're showing you dependence and I shouldn't get upset about that. But.
Hey moms, it's Katie. Well, it's the month of August and that means back to school, back to routines, and we want you to get back in a group. Grab a few friends, neighbors, or moms from church and walk through one of our Birds on a Wire video studies together, like Peace for the Anxious Mom or The Counterintuitive Parent. And as a fun bonus, when you buy a study from Birds on a Wire this August, we'll send you a free sweatshirt. Just use the promo code PEACE at checkout and cover shipping. It's our little way of saying, you've got this, mama. Head to boaw.mom/study to select a study and get your group going. That's boaw.mom/study. Because fall is better with friends and cozy sweatshirts.
With Wire Talk, most of our episodes are very practical, and we want to set these moms up the best for the school year. So my question is, whether these moms have a brand new kindergartner or a 5th grader, what is one area where parent involvement makes the biggest difference at this stage?
I think I alluded to this a minute ago, but really to me, it's in the communication space. Like we want to support them while they're in a supportive learning environment. So, it looks very different from kindergarten to 5th grade. So your child comes home with something at kindergarten and they're telling you about it. And it's really hard because from maybe something that happened at lunchtime to now the end of the day, they forget a lot of the details. So trying to get them to explain things and then always follow up with the teacher. Hey, this is what Johnny came home and talked about, because to get the other perspective, the teacher perspective, maybe she saw also what happened with other students and just kind of having that connection with the teacher first, always. But also as they get older, maybe 2nd, 3rd grade, hey, go back and talk to your teacher about that. And then, role play what that's going to look like. And then you can always tell the teacher, hey, they're coming in to talk to you about something. If they don't ask you by lunchtime, can you check in with them? And the teachers really want to build that relationship where they know the students feel safe coming to them about things. And even as an administrator, that's something I talk to kids about when they come and talk to me is, did you talk to your teacher? It's okay to disagree about something, but just choose the right time. Like maybe at recess when there's a moment where you can talk to your teacher one-on-one or right when you come in the mornings. So we just want to constantly be teaching and coaching our kids about how to talk to adults because that's not always really comfortable for kids. And so, it goes from you do it in the beginning to then kind of sending those back channeling emails, to help them, but then also giving them towards 4th and 5th grade, hey, go and talk to them about it in the morning and then checking in with them after school. How did that conversation go? And, maybe they forgot to do it so they can do it the next day, but we really just want them to know they have trusted adults. And sometimes that's a teacher, sometimes that's a counselor or an administrator. It could be a paraprofessional, just somebody in the building that they know they can trust and go to when they want to talk and they don't have the ability right then and there to talk to their parents.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that you said just talk to the teacher first. Like, hey, this is when we interviewed Miss Lisa, she said one of her teachers says, I won't believe everything that they say about me if you don't believe everything they say about vice versa. And I think that's such a good point, because I think if you have open communication with the teacher, that they're not trying to hide anything. They want to communicate with you, but you're also only hearing your kindergartner, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grades this big of a story. And there's always so many things going in between. You know what I mean? So just having that open communication with the teacher is so important.
Absolutely. And I think with now the day and age of social media, we want to go out to others to ask those questions or say, this is what happened, before we've even talked to the people that were involved. And so just making sure that you do get clarity. And you might not always see things eye to eye, but I think at least you know the other person's perspective.
Exactly.
And with that, we can, make progress for sure.
I love that.
Exactly.
For sure.
All right. What do you wish more moms understood about their child's academic or emotional needs during the early grades?
I think that just education's a journey, where there's so much growth that happens between kindergarten and fifth grade. And honestly, just within 1 year, a kid comes in one way and just the progress that they make is unbelievable.
Right.
And so I think you want to be a student of your child. So asking questions when your kid comes home and talks about, Miss Smith, she is the best teacher. Ask, well, what makes them the best teacher? Because oftentimes your child learns in a much different way than you do. And so sometimes, a lot of schools offer up a parent input form at the beginning of the year where you can talk about your child and what teacher or learning environment works best for them. And so honestly, sometimes you don't know as a parent how they're learning their best, but you can learn a lot by asking, well, why is that teacher a great teacher? And then also when they complain about a teacher, well, tell me more about that. Why didn't you like what she said? Or why do you think she's a bad teacher? Because there's little things that they will say, you'll realize sometimes it's a teaching style, but then also sometimes it's a classroom environment. A lot of people have a higher tolerance for noise, and maybe your child works best in a quieter environment, or your student is really active. And so honestly, the classroom where they get to sit on, some flexible seating is better for them. Low lighting versus traditional lighting. There's just so many things. And unless we ask those questions, you just don't know what's really helping them at school.
I love that. And I love how the different grades, you have different teachers, and I think your child benefits from all the different teaching styles. When my kids were little and growing up, I didn't always get the exact teacher I wanted. But by the end of the year, I always saw I see God, why he put them in his or her class. And some were stricter and some were more lenient, some were more creative. And it was just it was sort of cool over the whole 6 years of watching all the different styles and how my child grew and learned through all of them. And I used to tell my kids, I know she's not your favorite teacher, but you only have her for a year. So let's figure out what we can learn with her style this year and how you can learn to get along, because this is part of life.
Right.
And I felt like that was a good approach to teach my children, that you're not always going to get every single thing the way you want it, but we can always find something positive in the environment that you're in.
Absolutely.
So
on the other side of that, I always felt like you had the teacher's back. In the conversations with me, even though there were some emails and phone calls that you did on the back end that were but I didn't necessarily, I knew Mom had the teacher's back, and that's what, she supported the teacher, even if I didn't necessarily, because I think you were teaching me, this is your teacher. You don't have to like them,
your authority.
But your authority, and God will teach you something. My hardest elementary school teacher brought me my best friend. She's my lifelong best friend. But it was in your hardest year of a teacher. That teacher was so hard with Emily, or with the whole class. But that's where she found her best friend. Right. So I told Emily, it was a bad year. We'll just say it. But you got a best friend. You found Jenna. So there you go. So,
and I think that's huge, what you said, your mom had the teacher's back. Because there are conversations that are really between adults that kids don't need to be privy to.
Right.
But also your child's strongest advocate. So knowing hey, this might not be how you're seeing the situation at school, but this is their perspective at home.
Right.
And sharing that with the adult, I think, is huge. And I think sometimes parents are scared to do that because they're afraid of like retribution on their child. But really, the adult wants to know because, we all have, I know y'all have talked about the temperaments. We all have different temperaments. And maybe to that particular student, the teacher's delivery isn't coming off correctly. And they don't want that to happen.
That's right.
They really do want to partner with you and say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that she feels that way.
Right.
And so there's always, I think, work that can be done. And the child sometimes knows about it and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I agree. I love that.
There are so many moms listening with kids who are struggling in school during these years, whether it's grades, classroom behavior, learning disabilities, you name it. So what's your encouragement to them? Is there a bigger picture they can focus on so they're not discouraged by whatever they're struggling with?
So I think we have to remember that we're doing this all for the long game. So whether that's in parenting or with teaching and education. So, ultimately we're looking at, are we developing students who can communicate, who are continuous learners, who, can problem solve, that can engage in the community, at some point. And eventually they're going to find their strengths and what is really their purpose and what they're going to do. So even if they're struggling right now, we're always looking for progress. Like sometimes that's smaller, sometimes it's, big gains in a year. But as long as we're progressing and ultimately, what is the end result? What do you really want for your child at the end? And how are we continuing to put into that bucket? Because it is, there are years that are hard, but we just want to always be making sure that they're making progress towards academic goals. Sometimes we have to focus on the emotional regulation part first to get them in a place where they're ready to learn. So everybody's journey looks different and being okay with that, which is hard as a mom.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what are some problems your school is currently facing that would benefit from more parental involvement at home?
I think that in some ways you kind of alluded it to earlier, like I think we have to remember to, when our child comes home and maybe they've had a disagreement with a friend or something's happened within their school day, that we have to assume a kid lens on the issue. So I had another principal friend who, would always describe it like sometimes we put our adult lens on a kid situation. And so just remembering, maybe they're 7 at the time.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes both ways. Maybe they're really upset about something. And we kind of have to say like that is a big deal to you right now. But let's kind of look at the bigger picture. We talk at our school about big problems and small problems. And okay, well, is this a big problem or is it a small problem? And how can we work through this? So I think sometimes we're quick to put on our adult lens of that happened to us right now as an adult, what that would look like. But really it's, there's maybe 2 7-year-olds who are talking to each other and they're still learning how to interact socially and have those positive friendships. So a lot of it is just, it's kind of like we have to keep telling ourselves we're training, we're coaching them from home and helping them to have those positive relationships with other students. I think that's one of the biggest things, and I think probably goes back to COVID. Like we're still in some of that where maybe they don't have as many social opportunities or that kind of thing. So really trying to remember that we need to help foster those positive friendships.
My granddaughter, Evie, she's going in 6th grade. So she just graduated from 5th. And she was at this VBS, this school, this week. And so she spent the night with me Tuesday night. And she was saying that, she said, Mimi, why am I the only one that wants to be friends with people? And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, I'm always the one saying, do you want to be my friend? Nobody ever asked me if I want to be their friend. And I said, well, Evie, you're in middle school. And I said, a lot of times girls your age are insecure. They might be quiet. They might be shy. They don't know how to do that. So I think it's so good that you're saying, hey, I'm Evie, and do you want to be my friend? Because this is a church where she doesn't normally go. So all these people were new to her and for Vacation Bible School. And she's like, huh. And I said, it's not that they're being mean to you. They just may not know how to approach you. And I said, whenever you say, do you want to be my friend? Do they respond yes? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, then all is well. Like they're not against you, because that's where she started off. They're all against me. And I said, but they're not against you, because at the end of the day, y'all were friends. And she said, well, that's true. And I said, it's just, you have to give people a minute. They're not going to be instant friends kind of thing. So I just think, back to your point, that's where we as parents can come in and not blow it up and be like, nobody wants to be your friend, and oh, that's so sad, and da-da-da-da-da, when maybe that's not the whole case. Does that make sense?
Yes. And even I think in the classroom, a lot of times kids come home and they, are like, oh, I don't play with anybody. I don't have any friends. And it's like, she definitely needed that defined.
Yes.
Whereas some kids, they just think they're friends with anybody, and they've never asked them to be friends,
Right.
but they're friends.
Yes.
And so again, asking the teacher, it comes down to like, oh my goodness, they play with 4 to 5 people every day, the consistent people at recess.
Yes.
And when you're in kindergarten, they don't know their names yet. It takes them a while to even know who they're playing with.
That's right.
So I do think that she obviously needs that definition.
Right.
And some kids don't. They've already assumed they're friends.
Well, and it goes back to the temperaments, because she's a blue, and everything does have to be defined, and she has to understand everything fully. And it's like, oh my Lord, you need a little yellow in your life.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball a little bit.
Oh, okay.
So
Here
I'm
we
just
go.
going to ask you, as a former school teacher, as a mom, as a principal, what do you do when you truly do have some not nice friends that are surrounded your children in the elementary school, or you see certain students?
You mean like as a parent?
No, well, as a parent, but like, yes, as a parent, but like, how can you come alongside the teacher and be like, hey, how can we make this? Because you can't always. I think sometimes, you talk about this in one of your curriculums, that sometimes parents want to protect over preparation, and you can't always just pull them out of a classroom or put them in somewhere else. So, because you're going to have friends who don't get along with people in your classroom or whatever.
So how do you teach them how to work through it?
How do you teach them working out, like as a parent to the teacher, and do you have any encouragement on that end of things?
Yeah. I mean, even when I talk with kids in my office, I say, you don't have to be friends with everyone, but you do have to be kind.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about it. It's okay to say, if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable or unwelcome, like you can tell them, like, that really makes me feel unwelcome.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to say those things to another student. And so I think, again, looping the teacher in, there might be some needs where there's a degree of separation of like, hey, can we put them on different sides of the room? Or sometimes a class splits for specials. So, could we reconfigure that group? Or a lot of times teachers will say, hey, they really play a lot with Sarah. And so I'm going to try to foster that relationship a little bit. And teachers are very creative of how they can maneuver groups or partner work to partner up somebody that they know will kind of be a good friend to that student. And sometimes, one of those students is just going through a hard time. So it doesn't mean, that at some point they won't be friends, but
That's
just right now, maybe it's not working for one reason or another. So I think just getting creative with starting some new friendships that we think will be really positive, balanced with a little bit of distance that needs to happen also.
Well, yeah, Kelsey had a 5th grade teacher, and I'm forever thankful. And she told me in our parent-teacher conference, Kelsey's starting to be friends with these girls. And she said, you might want to encourage her to pursue this friendship. And she goes, that's all I'm going to say. And I said, okay, that's all I needed as a parent. And so then I encouraged Kelsey to be friends with the other little girl. And of course, Kelsey did, and ended up, that was a great friendship, And I just loved how that teacher just said, hey, just food for thought. I think this would be a good friendship for your daughter. And basically, she was sort of telling me, like, this is sort of the child you want your girl to be friends with. And I was like, okay, good to know. I'm new to the area, and I'm going to take you up on that advice. And it ended up being very good. So I love what you're saying, that, work with the teachers and be their advocate, because really they wouldn't be there if they didn't love those children.
We always have to assume positive intent with
Absolutely.
everyone.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay.
I think that is so important, just because Harper just finished her kindergarten year, and you see parents that do both. Parents that are like super reactive, and this is happening, so I need to pull them. Like, well, just hold on,
Take a breath.
Take a breath. But I also see it the other way too. Like, just as I was in the classroom, just help, like even just at lunchtime. You know what I mean? If you watch the teachers go from the classroom to the lunch, they love on those kids so well. So just come alongside them and be like, hey, this is what my child is saying at home. How can I better help you, better help my child? And 99% of the time, they're like, hey, thank you so much. Let me look at this and I'll get back to you. Or there's an incident at Harper School last year and something happened. And I was so thankful because they called me. They told me exactly what happened. They answered all my questions. And I told my mom, I said, I just love that there is that communication between the admin to me, to Harper. They all want the best for those children. So I think youth is saying to go in with positive intent, like go in talking to your teacher, not as a defense, just like as a, hey, let's be a good partnership together.
I agree. All right, next question. For moms who want to invest in their kids' school, where are the areas of greatest need? What difference do involved parents make at your school?
I think involvement can look a lot of different ways, right? That could be through conversations. It could be through monetary donations. It can also look through time. Obviously, there's always the big things like being on the PTO board or the local school council, but not everybody has time for like monthly contributions. So my thing is always that nothing is too small. Like when I was a first grade teacher, I had somebody that I could send the pencils home with on Fridays because sharpening pencils during the classroom time was a little pet peeve of mine. And so I could send that home with a mom. She sharpened them on the weekends and they came back on Monday ready to go. So that was
nice.
like a huge help that I wasn't doing after school, right? And so I think any time that we can do something, you're giving back a teacher's time, right? So we have a grandmother that comes and she knows Grammy. And so Grammy comes and teachers will leave like a little basket of like lamination to be cut. And it's this year's teacher, but also the previous year's teacher because she just wants to help in any way that she can.
That's so sweet.
And so something that takes her, 20 minutes to 40 minutes at night, then she's saving that teacher that time.
Yeah.
We have some dads that through our, we have all pro dads at our school. And so they meet monthly to have conversations with their kids. And I was like, hey, we have these recess equipment like holders that I was going to put out. And I said, I have one for each playground. Does anybody want to take it home and assemble it and bring it back? Because you know who puts that stuff together? Me. And I think people don't realize that the principals and the teachers are doing things like that all the time. So, of course, they were more than happy to do that. And I think especially for our dads, they're like, hey, we love being able to put stuff together for you. So when there's a need again, let us know. And so just thinking about what can you offer and either talking to the teacher if it's a classroom thing or the principal. We have parents who come and take a car line duty once a month. So
that's nice.
There's a lot of opportunities, especially on a rainy day or really cold day.
You'll take all the volunteers.
So I think just maybe what are your strengths or just what is the time that you have to give?
Right.
Because everybody's ability to contribute looks different.
Well, and it looks different throughout the years because I know whenever I had Taylor and Abby, you couldn't bring little ones into the classroom. So I would tell the teacher, hey, I can't come in the classroom, but I'm happy to cut things out, for you, or I could get supplies or whatever. Just tell me what you need. And then as they got into school, I could come in and help in the classroom or do whatever. It just depends on what season of life you're in. And then whenever I started working full time, I couldn't do that, but I could do other things. So like you said, just be available.
Or write them a note, an email.
Oh, that's true.
I don't think you realize there's a lot that teachers don't always hear the wonderful things that they're doing.
Sort of like being a mom.
Right. I just recently had a parent who sent me an email and talked about individual letters that the teacher had written to each student.
Oh, wow.
And what an impact that had made on her daughter. And I think she could have received that letter and been like, wow, that was so nice. But instead, she reached back out to the teacher and said, man, that made the biggest difference to our daughter at that time of the year. And then she sent something to me saying, I just need you to know this happens. Because as administrators, we don't see all the amazing things that our staff does all day long. So we usually hear when the things aren't being the most amazing things. But it's so encouraging to hear. Because here I read this in the summer and my eyes were very teary and just so proud. Like I know that our staff works so hard. So for parents to see that and to take the time to send an email or to write a note to school, I think is also huge. It fills the buckets of teachers and staff.
It's a great idea.
That's so sweet.
Okay. As we wrap up, we always like to give the moms something practical that they can do today to make a difference in this area with their child. So what's one practical thing or a few practical things moms of elementary age kids can do this week to start the school year off on the right foot?
All right. So I would say to encourage independence, whatever that looks like. So if you have a rising kindergartner, as they're having their snacks, make sure they can open them and then only send things that can be opened by them, and so, which seems so small, but
Right.
it
Makes a
is
big
really
difference.
helpful. And they love that they come to lunch or snack time, but that they can do it themselves. They're very proud.
Yes.
The kids are. And that looks, like I said earlier, like different at every age range, but whatever is developmentally appropriate, getting them to become more independent. And then also just to be curious about your child and ask those questions throughout. I love, like some people say, was it like roses and thorns? Or at the end of the day, what's something that was really great about your day? Was there anything you could wish you could change about your day? And kind of giving those open-ended questions just for your child to be able to share a little bit more.
Right. I love that. Those are good thoughts.
Yes. Well, Amber, thank you so much for coming in and answering all of our questions. I know the moms are just going to eat it up because it's just it's so good. It's so practical, but also it's encouraging to see that people like you are in charge of school systems who love
Absolutely.
their staff, who love the children, who are for the family. So thank you so much for what you do in the school system. And thank you for being on our podcast and talking to all the moms. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so honored to have you here.
Yes.